7 Tonight Show guests who arrived high as a kite. For 3 decades, viewers watched the same familiar ritual unfold on television screens across America. The iconic blue curtain would part. Johnny Carson would walk confidently onto the stage, deliver his monologue, and settle behind his desk with perfect timing and control. To audiences at home, The Tonight Show felt polished, dependable, and effortless. But behind the scenes, the reality was often far more chaotic. According to former producers and staff members, Carson had an uncanny ability to tell within seconds whether a guest was drunk, stoned, high on cocaine, or under the influence of something even stronger. The moment a celebrity walked onto the stage, Johnny could read the signs immediately. One former producer recalled that Carson's expression would subtly change whenever an impaired guest appeared. Part amusement, part concern, and part silent realization that the interview might suddenly become unpredictable television. The Tonight Show staff even developed discreet backstage systems to deal with these situations. Production assistants watched for warning signs, while directors prepared backup plans in case interviews spiraled out of control. A former staffer revealed that Carson used secret signals during introductions. If Johnny adjusted his tie while introducing a guest, it meant the person probably was not completely sober. If he straightened his cue cards twice, directors knew to keep camera work simple because the interview might become unstable at any moment. These silent cues became part of the Tonight Show's survival system during the wild entertainment culture of the 1970s. The decade was overflowing with excess. Celebrities openly experimented with alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, pills, and psychedelics. Many stars arrived at NBC studios heavily under the influence before stepping in front of millions of viewers. And somehow, Johnny Carson still had to make everything look normal. Former staff members admitted that some Oscar winners, rock stars, and comedy legends arrived so impaired they could barely focus. Carson often found himself less like a talk show host and more like a calm babysitter trying to guide famous guests through live television without disaster. One of the biggest reasons celebrities struggled before appearing on the show was pressure. The Tonight Show was the most powerful platform in entertainment. A great appearance could launch a career overnight, while a bad interview could damage a reputation for years. Unlike modern talk shows with heavily rehearsed segments, Carson preferred spontaneous conversations. Guests had no script to rely on. That terrified many celebrities. Backstage, the famous Tonight Show green room became a place where anxiety mixed with substances. The bar was fully stocked with top-shelf alcohol, and according to former employees, the unofficial rule was simple. 1 drink was acceptable, 2 drinks were risky, and anything beyond that became dangerous. But enforcing limits on major celebrities proved nearly impossible. During the 1970s and early 1980s, recreational drug culture exploded across Hollywood. Marijuana, cocaine, prescription pills, and psychedelics became deeply connected to the entertainment industry. The Tonight Show simply reflected the era surrounding it. Johnny Carson himself occasionally enjoyed a drink, but he remained famously disciplined on camera. That contrast made his interviews with impaired celebrities even more fascinating. Former producers explained that Carson adapted his style depending on the guest condition. If someone was only slightly relaxed from alcohol or marijuana, Johnny would gently guide the conversation. But if a guest became heavily impaired, he simplified questions, shortened interviews, and quietly tried to regain control without embarrassing anyone publicly. One of the most famous examples was comedian George Carlin. By the early 1970s, Carlin had transformed from a clean-cut comic into a counterculture icon. His long hair, rebellious material, and openly relaxed attitude reflected the changing culture of the decade. Carlin appeared on The Tonight Show more than 130 times and became one of Carson's favorite guests. Staff members admitted there was rarely any doubt that Carlin was high during many of those appearances. One camera operator joked that the glazed expression in Carlin's eyes practically became part of his public image. Yet unlike other guests, Carlin remained remarkably functional. He stayed sharp, witty, and brilliantly funny even while visibly stoned. Former staffers described him as a functioning herbalist, someone whose marijuana use actually blended naturally into his creative process. Carson understood this perfectly. Instead of fighting against Carlin's wandering thoughts, Johnny leaned into them. He asked open-ended questions and allowed Carlin to drift into hilarious philosophical monologues that audiences loved. Years later, Carlin openly admitted the truth in his autobiography, joking that of course he was stoned during many Tonight Show appearances because it was the 1970s and he was George Carlin. But not every guest handled substances as smoothly. Richard Pryor represented a far more dangerous kind of unpredictability. Pryor was widely considered one of the greatest comedians alive, but his struggles with cocaine became increasingly severe throughout the late 1970s. Staff members recalled that Pryor could shift from brilliant to deeply erratic within moments. One stage manager remembered that Pryor sometimes began interviews as the funniest man in the room before suddenly drifting mentally somewhere else entirely. During one memorable appearance, Pryor started telling a story that slowly dissolved into disconnected observations. Audience members nervously laughed, unsure whether it was intentional comedy or genuine confusion. Carson immediately switched into what staffers called protection mode. He interrupted with simple questions, redirected the conversation, cracked jokes to ease tension, and smoothly sent the show to commercial break before things worsened. Unlike some hosts who might have exploited an impaired celebrity for entertainment, Carson genuinely tried to protect Pryor's dignity. Former NBC executives later revealed that Johnny deeply admired Pryor's genius and privately worried about his self-destructive behavior. Another unforgettable Tonight Show disaster involved literary icon Truman Capote. Capote had always been a popular guest because of his sharp wit and fascinating personality. But during a 1980 appearance, staff members said he arrived severely impaired by what appeared to be a dangerous combination of pills and alcohol. The moment Capote walked onto the stage, crew members realized something was terribly wrong. He slurred his speech so badly that viewers could barely understand him. His head repeatedly nodded forward before snapping back upright. The control room reportedly panicked as producers struggled to salvage the interview. Unlike his calm handling of comedians like Carlin and Pryor, Carson became visibly frustrated. Former producers later revealed that Johnny was furious backstage during commercial breaks. Carson believed Capote had crossed the line from relaxed behavior into complete disrespect for the audience and the show itself. Capote's appearance became one of the rare incidents that resulted in a permanent ban from The Tonight Show. Afterward, NBC tightened backstage monitoring procedures and became more cautious about guests who appeared severely impaired before airtime. Then there was the legendary comedy duo Cheech and Chong. Unlike many celebrities who tried hiding their substance use, Cheech Marin and Tommy Chong built their entire comedy careers around marijuana culture. Former writers explained that Carson actually enjoyed playing along with their stoner image. He often pretended to misunderstand obvious drug references, creating hilarious exchanges where both the audience and the guests understood the joke perfectly. One producer said Carson intentionally played the role of the confused straight man, while Cheech and Chong delivered their laid-back, rambling stories. Instead of fighting their personalities, Johnny allowed them to fully embrace who they were. The result became some of the funniest Tonight Show moments of the era. Peter Fonda created an entirely different kind of chaos. During a notorious 1970 appearance, staff members strongly suspected Fonda was under the influence of LSD. Crew members remembered his enormous pupils, distracted behavior, and bizarre responses. He frequently stared at the studio lights and appeared disconnected from reality before suddenly returning to the conversation seconds later. At one point, Carson asked Fonda about upcoming movie projects. Instead of answering normally, Fonda launched into a surreal discussion about time travel, cosmic consciousness, and reality existing like a blanket wrapped around humanity. That was enough for Carson. Johnny quietly gave the emergency signal to cut the interview early. Only 5 minutes into what was supposed to be a long segment, producers abruptly went to commercial break. When the show returned, Fonda had been replaced by another guest without explanation. Perhaps the most uncomfortable Tonight Show appearance came from British actor Oliver Reed. Reed already carried a reputation for heavy drinking and wild behavior, but during his 1975 appearance, things quickly became alarming. Former crew members said Reed arrived visibly intoxicated and grew increasingly aggressive as the interview continued. His speech became louder, more erratic, and occasionally hostile. At one point, Reed unexpectedly stood up and demonstrated a fighting stance on stage, causing security personnel to move closer. Staff members recalled seeing Carson's expression change from amusement to genuine concern within minutes. Unlike his more patient approach with harmless stone guests, Carson immediately became firm and controlling. He forcefully redirected Reed, interrupted rambling outbursts, and cut the segment short. Afterward, Reed reportedly became one of the few celebrities permanently banned from the show. Finally, there was Sammy Davis Jr. Unlike the obvious disasters involving Capote or Reed, Davis represented a different category entirely. The highly functional but suspiciously energetic performer. During a 1974 appearance, Davis appeared unusually hyperactive. Staff members described him talking incredibly fast, sweating heavily under studio lights, and constantly jumping between thoughts. Backstage rumors strongly suggested cocaine use. However, unlike some impaired guests, Davis remained completely professional and entertaining throughout the interview. Carson skillfully guided the conversation while allowing Davis's rapid-fire energy to shine naturally. A producer later recalled Carson joking during commercial break that he felt exhausted just sitting next to Sammy. What made Johnny Carson remarkable throughout all these incidents was his balance between professionalism and compassion. He rarely judged guests publicly. Instead, he focused on one simple goal: creating entertaining television while protecting everyone's dignity. Former staff members explained that Carson viewed impairment on a spectrum. If a guest remained funny, charming, or functional, Johnny adapted and kept the interview moving. But if someone became aggressive, incoherent, or disrespectful, Carson's patience ended immediately. According to Long Time,